Welcome back to the Cozy Cookhouse, where we make the most of what nature gives us. Fall has arrived with cold, rainy days reminding us that the growing season is ending. But that doesn't mean we waste a thing. So today we're preserving green tomatoes. Yes, you heard that, green tomatoes from our garden, turning the last crops of summer into something delicious, long-lasting, and actually healthy for you. So grab a mug of something warm and let's bring a little cozy comfort into these autumn days by preserving the harvest. So this right here is a jar of my pickled green tomatoes from 2022, which were lacto-fermented in water and salt. There are no artificial ingredients and they still look and taste amazing. The brine is vibrant with a tangy flavor and the tomatoes have kept that perfect balance of crunch and acidity. It's like opening a time capsule of preserved summer flavors. We enjoy these with fried eggs for breakfast and it was just amazing. My eggs here are seasoned, of course, with our favorite Slappy Mama seasoning, but in combination with the pickled tomatoes, well, let me tell you, it's one delicious combo. Having fermented foods with meals helps with digestion and overall immunity. They're a powerhouse of probiotics and vitamin C, which cannot be bought in a pill. I'll show you the easiest way to make it, and I'm basically using a similar method as when I'm making the Korean kimchi, which is also a fermented food, but we keep it simple without so many spices. But if you want to try my kimchi recipe, I'll just add the link down below and also in the upper right corner as well, so you can check it out. So I've been doing this method for many years and it always turns out great. I've never had a moldy jar yet. Hopefully I won't have one, but if you do, make sure you do throw it out because you don't want to get sick. But if you use this method of boiling water, this is the brine. I boil water with iodine-free salt or some kind of pickling salt that's not treated. It doesn't have any anti-caking agents. And then we pour that on top of our vegetables. That's going to help ferment and turning into a really delicious pickle. Really amazing. I really hope you give it a try and let me know in the comments how you like it. So one thing to remember is just the water to salt ratio, which is 1 liter of water to 1 tablespoon of salt. It's just that simple. So I have my tomatoes washed, the stems removed, and all of the blemished tomatoes out of the batch because I want them to turn good, not bad. I have my jars ready and washed. You don't need to sterilize them because we're doing a raw ferment. Okay, so we're just gonna gather all of the rest of the ingredients. I like to add some carrots for color and for crunch. They're really tasty when they're pickled. And I have here some fresh bay leaves from my garden. Obviously, if you don't have these, just use dried. I have mustard seeds as well, which keeps the crunch in the tomatoes. Some dried dill, peppercorns, and of course the Celtic sea salt. You can use any kind of untreated sea salt. It has to be without any caking agents or anti-caking agents. And I have some fresh herbs again, some celery leaves and thyme, hot peppers, and fresh oregano. Like I said, just use dry if you don't have any. I also have here the horseradish root, which is important because this is what keeps everything crisp and crunchy. If you cannot find it, you can just use other types of leaves. I'll leave the ideas down in the description down below. Some onions because we love onions and some garlic. They are so delicious and it adds to the flavor. Now, I don't always add the hot peppers, so if you don't want the heat, you can skip that. And I have some leftover onions here from our breakfast, which I will surely add because we love pickled onions. Okay, so let's get started. As soon as we have everything washed, we can start putting the water to boil. I have here about 5 liters of water with 5 tablespoons of Celtic salt. Like I said, you can use Redmond's real salt or any other type of untreated salt. If you have it with iodine in it or regular table salt, your ferment will not turn out okay. Everything will rot and it's not going to be nice. So make sure that you have a nice real pickling salt that you can use for this ferment. Now we're gonna have everything peeled and ready to go. I have all my garlic, my carrots and onions, And this is the horseradish root I was telling you guys about. If you do find it and you have a little space in your garden, you can actually propagate it. You can just put a little bit of the root in the soil, and then you have a nice, it's gonna be huge. It's gonna turn into a nice big bushy plant with large leaves. I used to grow it, but now I just don't grow it anymore since I moved to where I live right now. But you can use the leaves as well after you have the horseradish planted. We're just gonna slice the garlic in half so that it releases all of the good flavors into the brine. We're gonna also slice the carrots, and we're gonna cut up the horseradish, which is a little tough. It's like a tough root, but it's a little spicy as well. So we're gonna cut it up in like chopsticks. I also have here a few hot peppers from my garden. I'm just gonna slice them up. I can also use them whole. Sometimes I put them whole, like in my jar from 2022. But be aware that it will turn your pickles into a little hotter variety, which is tasty if you like heat. We also like heat, so sometimes I just pull up a jar with hot peppers in it. In terms of the onions, you can either slice them like I'm doing here, or you can chop them into larger chunks. Anything goes, really. There's no rule. You can add whatever you want as long as they're like the crisp root vegetables so that they won't turn mushy. These will remain nice and crisp, and I like to have sometimes just a big chunk of onion on my plate. So you can just cut them up whatever way you like. In the meantime, do not forget your water on the stove. It's probably been boiling. Sometimes I just leave it for closer to the end because I have a whole lot of vegetables here to prepare. But don't forget that your water must be boiling for about 2 minutes only, and then just let it cool down a little bit. Now I'm going to start filling up the jars, a few at a time. And we're gonna layer them at the bottom first with some herbs. So I like to put like a fresh or dried bay leaf here and there. Sometimes I put 2 of them if they're smaller, but these are larger ones, so 1 is enough. And then I'm just gonna add some fresh celery leaves that I have here. They are also really tasty in pickles or fermented vegetables, and about 1 whole clove of garlic at the bottom, which is cut in half, so 2 halves. I have some oregano leaves here. You can just use the dried version as well if you don't have it. And I'm gonna start with the larger tomatoes to put at the bottom, and then fill up the spaces with the little ones so that they're all really well packed. I like to combine them. Sometimes if the jar is not large enough, I can just slice the tomatoes in half or quarters so that they fit. And I'm also adding a piece of horseradish right there, and then of course some more closer to the end as well and throughout the vegetables. Do you see here how I basically just stack everything together, including the horseradish sticks? I'm just pushing them really well down so that they all stay packed together. I'm trying not to break them, but you really need to add a little bit of gentle force, however that goes. But you have to get the feel of it. Make sure you push them down a little bit, and then the empty spaces I just fill up with carrots or onions as well, and some more garlic. And I like to use the bigger chunks, like I said, or sometimes I just use the slices if that doesn't fit in. So just make sure that you fill up all those empty spaces so that things won't float up at the top. I also have a larger one here, which I like to put at the top so that everything stays submerged and underneath the brine that we will add to the jar. Some of the jars didn't really have brine all the way to the top because it evaporated, and I think I have a jar that I'll show to you at the end, and nothing happened. It was just perfectly fine, and we even enjoyed some of it this morning actually. So don't go stressing about it too much. Have a feel, whatever fits in there, and then make sure you leave some headspace. Sometimes I'm forgetful of that. I just want to fill as much as possible, but make sure you have some headspace, about 1 inch, so that you can cover it up with liquid, with the brine. Now I'm adding the peppercorns and dried dill, about a quarter of a teaspoon of dried dill if you don't have the fresh one, and a quarter or half a teaspoon of mustard seeds. This is what keeps everything crisp. The mustard seeds are a must. So make sure you put them in. Sometimes I put them at the top, but I like to usually put the herbs and the spices at the bottom. So I'm going to show you with my next jars. I'm just putting everything at the bottom. So then when I add the fluid, the liquid, everything will just be submerged and mingle with the rest of the ingredients. As long as you put your spices in, everything will be fine. But this is how I prefer doing it. Add everything at the bottom of the jar and then fill up the jars with the vegetables, add the liquid, seal them up, and then let the fermentation begin. So as you can see, once you have everything ready to go, cut up and washed and on top of your countertop, it is a pretty quick process. It's actually really relaxing, for me at least, because of all the colors and all of that beautiful harvest. So once you have everything prepared, it's not a hard process at all, and it's so beautiful. Just look at that. You are preserving your harvest for later in the winter time or in the fall days, ready to be enjoyed with a piece of roast meat and some mashed potatoes. They pair so well together. It's really delicious and good for you. So if you do not have the horseradish root, which is sometimes really hard to find, I had to go to a few grocery stores to actually find the root. You can just use instead oak leaves or cherry leaves or even currant leaves. So if you have these plants or trees in your garden or in your neighborhood, you can actually use those. So just, fold them together, just put it at the bottom and here and there, and also layer it at the top. So at the end, like you do sauerkraut, you put a leaf of cabbage, a cabbage leaf. All you have to do is put a few leaves of, like 1 or 2 leaves of oak leaf, currant leaf, or the cherry tree leaf. So you can use that instead, which will keep the vegetables nice and crisp and crunchy and really tasty. So as you can see, I filled up all of my jars that I had washed, and I actually still have a whole lot more to go. So this is my second bowl. I still have to cut up some more carrots and onions, but I'm gonna go wash up some other jars and maybe a large one as well. In the meantime, I will still just cover them up in the brine that I had ready on the stovetop. So be gentle with it because it is hot, but you want the liquid to be hot. Okay, so not room temperature. It needs to be 10 minutes away from the boiling point. So after it boils for 2 minutes, you let it cool down for 10 minutes. And then we just cover up the jar in the brine. Make sure you leave some headspace. Mine are always a little overfilled, but do not take my example. Leave about 1/2 inch or 1 inch of headspace. I'm going to remove some of that brine from there, and I'm going to continue with the rest of the jars. Now I'm just adding 1 bay leaf at the top to keep everything submerged. In the past, I loved using the dry parts of the dill plant, but I do not have that. So I'm just using any kind of herb that would cover the tomatoes really nicely. In this case, my large bay leaves. And then I'm just screwing the tops right on and moving on to the rest of the jars. Make sure you stay tuned because next week I would like to share with y'all our favorite ferment, which is something that many of you have maybe never tried before, and it's actually pickled cauliflower. It may be sounding weird or maybe you've never heard of this before, but it's so delicious and crisp and crunchy and just perfection. So I'm going to share with you how I make that as well, and again, it's so easy. Stay tuned for next week. So as you can see, I'm all done with the jars. Now this is in the evening and everything is packed together nicely. Now you can see that I added some other jars with different lids. Basically, I'm just repurposing them, and I've been doing this for years. As long as the lids are okay and not bent or whatever, you can have a nice seal. Then you can actually reuse store-bought jars from your, I don't know, pasta, sauces, or whatever you bought. And it works just fine. So you don't have to go crazy and buy any new jars if you have collected a few over the months. Now, because they're in front of the window, I will make sure to cover them with a dishcloth so that they're out of the sunlight. They're away from sunlight, but there's still a little bit of sun, as you can see. So I'm putting some large dishcloths on top, and I'm placing them inside some trays, or you can just use some large plates, because as they start fermenting, they will leak fluid all over the countertop if you don't have that underneath. So make sure you put them on some kind of trays. And then just leave them overnight. The next morning, you open them up, and you can see that it's starting to ferment because we see the bubbles coming up. You don't have to open them up all the way. Just unscrew them and then close again. And the large one, make sure I have a big jar, like I said, and just open it, let the gases release, shake it a little bit so that the bubbles go up, and then close it back down and cover them all up. And we're going to do the same thing before bedtime and in the morning, as you remember. So I like to keep them on my countertop so I can keep an eye on them, or on my other table in the kitchen. So I'm just going to keep an eye on these jars for the next day or two, depending how hot your house is. But for me, usually 2 days, I like to keep them here, and I'm going to make sure to burp them every day. And then if there's any more liquid that I need to add, I'm going to make the same brine, basically 1 liter of water with 1 tablespoon of iodine-free salt. And I will boil it for 2 minutes, let it cool down for 10 minutes, and add it at the top of the vegetables to make sure that there's enough liquid. I'm going to seal them right up, and I'm going to move them down in my cellar or in the basement, wherever there's cool and dark environment for your jars. I'm going to keep them there again, placing them on a tray because they might still be leaking, which is fine. You don't have to do anything else anymore, but make sure you put them on a tray because it can get messy, and it happened to me before, and I just had to clean it up and wipe it up, and that's it. But they turn out really amazing. I hope you give it a try, and I'll see you in my next video. Oh, and I would also like to add that the liquid will start to turn cloudy, which is part of the normal fermentation process, so do not worry about it. In time, it will clear up and the sediments will just go down at the bottom, so don't worry about it. That means the ferment is going really well. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss out on my next videos.